All right, so I apologize in advance. I'm not texting, I'm looking at notes on my phone. So there was a lot of conversation, a lot of good talking points that you all shared during your presentations, and I wanted to make sure I had some good notes to refer back to. But, I've said for a while as we've been planning and talking about this conference that I think we learn more from talking with each other than we do talking to each other. So it's important that we take an opportunity to have some discussion this morning. So the first thing that kind of comes to my mind when we talk about labor and staffing challenges, recruitment, is how do we compete? I think that for most of us in healthcare, we're finding that we may lose employees to or potential candidates to the fast food restaurant down the street that can start them tonight. They can start tonight, and as you know, there's barriers that exist when we're recruiting folks in healthcare. So how do we navigate that particular challenge? We'll start with Caitlin.
Yeah. I think what I've noticed most is that presenting them with the idea that this is more about customer service and hospitality, as we talked about, then a food service job is really where I tend to catch the most people, and giving them the tools and the resources about your organization to show them that this is not a fast food job. This is where you're going to have some really great connections. The relationship part of our jobs is really going to sell a lot of people, I think.
Yeah, and to join on that, I mean, we've been presenting hospitality as a career, and we are a temporary staffing company, but what we're finding now is we're engaging and placing more and more individuals in these 40-hour-a-week type of scenarios. They're not just going to a gig. They're really getting back into the hospitality industry as a whole. And I think that speaks to, what the doctor was, referring to, your culture. What are you providing for your people? Again, you have to really work at it, but I do feel it's so value added if you're, offering that type of culture to support them, to train them further, to really listen to them and where they want to take their career in hospitality.
Yeah, that makes sense. As you're talking, it makes me think, and we all know at the height of the pandemic, or maybe even the start of the pandemic, many folks that were seasoned in the food service industry abandoned it because they felt like we abandoned them, right? We closed every restaurant down, that they weren't able to make ends meet. So they said, you know what, I'm going to reinvent myself. I'm going to step outside of food service, do something a little different. Now that we're back to the point we are today, how do we re-recruit those individuals back into the food service industry? How do we make them informed about what we do in the food service industry today, and then get them excited about it? And Dr. Jeff, what's your thought there?
Well, I think we have to decide whether we're going to do short-term and long-term thinking. That it's easy to grab at short-term things, pay a little bonus, do a little of those kinds of things, and in the short run, maybe you'll get somebody. But if we set up and say, here's the long-term, what we're going to do, rather than here's a quick bonus, here's an educational program that if you stay with us over time, we'll pay for your technical school, your college, you'll add to those kinds of things. Here's the other 8 programs in our organization connected to food service that are very exciting. We have these robots, we have this, we have these kinds of things. We have these exceptional programs in bariatrics or elderly care, or we reduced our food waste. We have a very environmentally sound program. We reduced our food waste 95%. We save money, and we improve the well-being of people at the Salvation Army at the same time. So I think you build a package that will entice those people that you really want for more permanent employees.
Peter, what's your take on it? Do you think, I guess a spin on something that Jeff said is, I know a lot of folks will look at a food service job, whether it be in higher education or healthcare or institutional feeding in general, as like a foot in the door opportunity. And then, I want to start here and then work my way up. And what they mean by that is, I want to get the hell out of food service as quick as I can. So how do we work towards explaining to folks that there are career opportunities, real career opportunities to build on your education while still staying within the food service and hospitality industry?
Yeah, I have some pretty strong feelings about this topic. I come from the kitchens originally, and when you join the restaurant industry, there was a stigma, right? You give up your weekends, you give up your holidays, you give up your lives, essentially. And that has to change, right? That's a piece that has to change, because we see less and less students going into hospitality programs. We see less and less students going into culinary programs. And, to touch on your point on the non-commercial food service side, I don't know that we do a good job of selling ourselves from any of those industries, for whether it be healthcare, B&I, or college, university, food service. And one of the things that's very important to me is I go to high schools, I go to culinary programs, I go to hospitality programs to let them know about this industry, to let them know that this exists, to let them know that they can have a very successful career, not give their lives up, still maintain a work-life balance, and still be able to continue with a strong professional development path. So I think that we, as a non-commercial industry, need to do a better job of getting in front of those folks, right? I know when I went through culinary school, college, university, food service, I'm not going to fry chicken tenders and, serve raviolis, And when I took this job, I talked to my friends from culinary, and they laughed. They were like, you're working in a cafeteria. And we are so far beyond that at this point that, I am a little biased on the college university side, but I think that we are the leaders in the food service industry, and that we need to sell that more, and we need to let individuals know that this industry, this non-commercial industry exists.
Well, I think that's 100% right, and I think the rest of us could help. That is, the rest of the organization could make it clearer how important nutrition services is to the broader whole of health and well-being of the organization and the community, and how it's not a cafeteria sitting in a hospital. I mean, that's a small part of it now. It's connected to the whole of the community, and food connected. I mean, the co-op that we helped form in Viroqua in rural Wisconsin. I mean, all these things, the food service people are so important to the well-being of the whole. I think the rest of us could recognize that more, call that out, and that would probably be a good start as well.
Yeah, I think that is applause-worthy. But the big question I'm sure a lot of folks here would have, Jeff, is I'm blessed with a senior leader that is very committed to food as medicine and understands the role that nutrition plays in the overall healthcare picture. But I do believe that that's probably not always the norm, right? I think there's a lot of folks sitting in the C-suite that do maybe have the mentality of, well, you guys are running the cafeteria, good job, just make sure everybody gets fed today. How do we negate that? How do we approach I'm able to sit down and have lunch with our CEO and say, this is what we're thinking. She'll give us feedback. But I would guess that not everybody has that same type of relationship. How do we approach the C-suite and say, these are the things we could be doing?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a problem. I've been around CEOs a long time. I spent my whole life making fun of them before I was one. I continue now that I am. And there's certainly a good portion of us that are ignorant and full of hate. But my approach to this, and I'm very involved in the environmental movement, and that's another piece that a lot of CEOs are dragging their foot on despite a chance to lead. And I think it's our responsibility to rise up and give them unlook-awayable data, unlook-awayable examples, involve, patients and community members and board members and other people to speak for us. And don't give up. Measure your statistics, show what you're doing, show what you've accomplished, continually frame it in the greater good of the whole. And of course, some people will come through food service and go on and work elsewhere. Great. That means they'll have a better understanding of how important that is to the organization. Sure. But many can stay if we build a great system within food service. So I think it's partly our responsibility. They aren't going to get it falling off a log or at the golf course, we got to give it to them. And there's so many good examples. There's a lot of good things going on.
Yeah, I appreciate the perspective. I think it's a good opportunity to share how important benchmarking is, and that we do have the benchmarking tool through AHF. But Peter, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, just to touch on that a little, it took our campus a pandemic to realize how important we were to the campus. We're in food service, we react constantly. We're constantly putting out fires, we're constantly solving challenges. Executives need to have a meeting to talk about a meeting, to form a committee, to have another meeting. Whereas we see, we solve, and we implement, right? And they had to set up COVID testing for thousands of people to get through, and they couldn't get through the forest, right, to get it planned. So they came to us. How do you guys get thousands of people through a line on a regular basis? So we're setting up COVID testing stations on campus.
Yeah.
So we kind of left the kids' table and we got to the big kids' table.
Yeah.
And now we refuse to leave that table. We're not leaving that table anymore. We've shown the value we are to this organization, and we're going to stay here.
That's good.
That's awesome, guys. Well, I wish we had more time. I keep looking at this clock thinking, how can it be this close already? But I want to move on to a couple other topics. I think, when we talk about recruitment, retention, and I know both of you ladies shared some insight on that. So temp staffing in particular, I think temp staffing could play a big role in what we do. How do you navigate the barriers that come along with temp staffing in healthcare? So from my experience, we try to use temp staffing, and they've got to have 75 documents to them, and they have to have all their shots, their vaccinations, their proof of this, that, and the other. Whereas, in reality, once again, they can go down the street to somewhere else that doesn't have all those restrictions and have a job starting tomorrow. So how do we navigate that red tape that exists, the necessary, by the way, red tape that exists in healthcare?
What we found, especially during the pandemic, because when everything did stop, we'd always been involved in healthcare staffing, but more on the senior dining and retirement side, community side rather. So the hospitals, we quickly saw all of the boxes that needed to get checked in order to have our staff come in. But I think that speaks to some of what I was sharing earlier. If you're looking to work with a company that has that hospitality staffing focus, they're going to be a true partner. They're going to know, okay, this is where we go to send you. You have to go get these tests. We want you to do it at this, organized. Your partner will organize the staff, make sure everything is done and committed, so you can get people in the door as soon as that TB test is read.
Yeah, and I think in temp staffing, you're almost better prepared to be able to do that, because you can start a pool of people that would be available, right? But in the talent acquisition world within an organization, Caitlin, how do we navigate the fact that they can go to McDonald's or O'Reilly Auto Parts or something? I mean, we lost people to the strangest locations during the pandemic. How do we navigate around the fact that they can go there and start tomorrow, whereas you may tell them, and I'm sure this isn't just isolated to my organization, it's going to be 2 to 3 weeks before you can even come in to do X, Y, or Z. In our industry, in the food service industry in general, people want to start today. They want to start tomorrow.
Yes.
You can't tell them, hey, I have a job for you. It'll be ready in 6 weeks.
Yes.
So how do we get around that?
I experienced that as well. I work in California, and if any of you are from there, the country of California has about a month's worth of checks and things you need to get through just to be a dishwasher in our kitchen. So definitely experienced that a lot. I think where I try to make the most difference is just that mindset of, well, if someone is willing to just take whatever job they can get the next day, that's maybe not the hospitality employee that you want in your organization. Now, I know we all have staffing problems, and there comes a point where you've kind of just got to make that sacrifice to get some bodies in the door, but I think the biggest battle we have is looking at other markets besides that food and beverage individual that's, kind of just job hopping until they find something permanent. If you can develop that pipeline of people who have a real passion for, culinary services or hospitality or anything like that, the people who necessarily don't have food and beverage background might actually be a better market for you to be pulling people from in that case.
And maybe I'll say, I'm not going to be argumentative, especially in front of all these fine folks, but the bottom line is there's many of us who can't go 6 weeks without a paycheck. So it's easy to say, if somebody's not willing to wait, are they the right fit? But it's not that they're not willing to wait. They can't.
Yes.
They can't financially afford to wait. And so how do we as an industry figure that out? How do we say, there's got to be a way for us to be able to put something in place to allow them to start sooner or to get something moving? And I do think that communication is important. I think that continuing to reach out to them and say, hey, this is where you're at in the process, we're continuing to work on it, that's important so they don't get lost in translation. But they're going to say, oh, that's wonderful, are you going to pay my light bill next week?
Well, for us with staffing, the beauty is they can work other events while they're waiting for those,
Right.
For those results to come back in. So that is a way that we definitely, that's our workaround, I would say, to that challenge, because they can, like, as I shared earlier, they can go work, an event in B&I or higher ed, and then, while they're waiting for their results to get back. But I think communication, as you mentioned, is super clear. You have to keep with your staff, and let them know, hey, you are at this part of the process, get ready, we're putting it on the schedule, you're going tomorrow for this result. So, we'll schedule for an event after or before, so you're still, earning a check.
Well, and it's completely off the cuff, and I just came up with it because I'm brilliant. But what if, it sounds like there could be an opportunity to figure out how for our talent acquisition folks in-house to partner with a temp agency to get those people through that period. I've got someone that it's going to take 6 weeks to onboard because of all of the necessary red tape, but I've got this friend here that's going to get you some work lined up during that 6 week period. So I don't know, maybe something we talk about later.
I think
That's absolutely what we do as well.
Yeah? No?
I think the other thing is to really challenge the necessary red tape part.
Right.
That there are HR departments and recruiting departments who are kind of set up on an old model, haven't really changed. They will say, yeah, but that's the policy or the rule. Sometimes they'll quote laws that they've never seen or really don't understand. Right. Not that saying, but it is another thing to say who gets the final vote in your organization. Some organizations it's finance, and some it's HR, and some it's legal. And I think one of the things when you're looking at processes, you got to re-examine all the processes and say, really, why do we really, and is that really required? And some things may be, and there's a state or federal law that says you have to check this. Well, maybe in the old days you have to check it on paper, and now you can do it electronically in 1 day rather than 8. But I think you challenge the necessary part, because I think a lot of those rules are more like the Pirates Code and their guidelines, not laws.
I absolutely agree, but I think lots of applause there. I think we're live streaming, so I'll say we don't have those problems in our organization. So I know we're kind of getting to the end of our time here, so I want to kind of wrap things up with a little bit of robotics discussions, because I think we were all intrigued by, and continue to be intrigued by, what you all have been able to do, Peter. I think there's a lot of questions that come to my head, like, one, what does it cost? What kind of an ROI do you have? I don't think we have the time to talk about that right now, but one of the things that I continue to be curious about is, we know delivery and robotics has worked well, and that technology continues to get better. But when we look at specific kitchen equipment automation, I know you're looking at the pizzas in particular, but when we look at kitchen automation, are we to the point where we should be investing in that yet, or should we be waiting until things come a little bit further along?
No, I think now's the time. We should be looking at those opportunities now. For all of the dishwasher manufacturers that are out there, if you guys can create a robotic arm that unloads plates off of a conveyor belt, that would be phenomenal. I think that, you know, our staffing situation isn't going to get better anytime soon, and we need to start to implement these things in our kitchens, again, for a multitude of reasons, right? But primarily to be able to have the staff that we do have, do that more meaningful work, that customer service, that hospitality, and try to implement these processes where we have more of the routine tasks that you don't necessarily need a human doing so that they can do more important work from my perspective.
So maybe more of a final question, because I'm sure somebody's going to tell me to be quiet shortly, but how do we justify then the expense of the automation if, you know, if what you're saying is it's not necessarily cutting jobs, it's not cutting FTEs? How are you then justifying the expense of the automation to, say, your senior leadership team?
That's a great question. I think that you have to, you know, I go back to the culture piece, we were able to build that culture within our campus, within the community, and to embrace that. So there is a cost associated with some of it. The robots didn't necessarily have an upfront cost, but some of the other stuff does. I think there's a piece of the vacancies and things that we're just not going to fill, right? So there are going to be some cost savings there, but it shouldn't be your primary focus. Some of those cost savings should go back into the program and back into your teams. I think that, you know, from a senior leadership standpoint, they have to understand the benefits. They have to understand how it's able to offer more options. You know, we were able to partner with our friends from Kellogg's for a time for a cereal robot, which we were able to have 24/7 access to, you know, however many cereal combinations and milk you could think of, including yogurt parfaits. So I think being able to expand those offerings outside of and not expand your operating hours, those are things that can add revenue directly back to your bottom line.
Oh, I appreciate it. And like I said, I really wish we had a lot more time this morning. Notes for next year, right? So I think we've come to the time where I'm supposed to wrap things up. Thank you all very much for a great discussion. I really appreciate it. And round of applause for our wonderful panel. So thank you all.